We are living in the most turbulent and convulsive period possibly in the whole of history on a world scale, certainly since the Second World War. And the dramatic events which have shaken the world and which are still unfolding on the streets of Tehran and other cities of Iran are a graphic demonstration of this fact. These events, as far as most people were concerned, seemed to fall like a thunderbolt from a clear blue sky. And in this country, this great country, by the way, it's a great country, it's a great nation with a great culture and a marvelous history, which has been systematically demonized by the West as a bunch of crazy fanatics, Islamic madmen, and so on and so forth. Want to bomb the world into annihilation with nuclear weapons. Incidentally, the United States, of course, has got the biggest stockpile of nuclear and chemical and bacteriological weapons in the world. That's okay. It's not okay for the Iranians. And Iran, that's the only image that's ever put forward for this great people, this great nation, this very courageous nation, by the West, by the hypocritical so-called democracies of the West. And therefore, most people would have been taken completely by surprise. They were taken by surprise. The Iranian regime was taken by surprise. The American imperialists were taken by surprise. This movement appeared, as I say, apparently from nowhere, but that's not the case. As a matter of fact, and you can check our website, you can check Marxist.com, we predicted this. And I personally have repeatedly predicted this movement. Even last summer at the international gathering of the International Marxist Tendency, I specifically made that point. Watch Iran. Keep your eyes on Iran. Incidentally, here's a little question for you. The same imperialists in Washington and London who for decades have been systematically denouncing Iran, these crazy people, this terrible nation. And now there's this revolutionary movement. All of a sudden, they become very timid in their criticism. You don't see them. They haven't even supported the movement, as a matter of fact. They kept their mouth well and truly shut. And the reason why they keep their mouths shut, now Obama's made a few timid statements, but that's nothing. I think the only European head of state that has criticized the election result is Sarkozy for his own reasons. None of the others, like Gordon Brown, they're all being very responsible and very... Now, why is this? And the reason is they're not interested in this. They don't want this movement. They certainly don't want the revolutionary overthrow of this regime from below. Why not? Because it is dangerous to them and their interest, particularly in this part of the world, which is a strategic part of the world, from the standpoint of imperialism, for different points of view. And what more strategic country can there be than Iran, which straddles two continents? In a sense, it's part of the Middle East, although it's not an Arab country. It's also part of Central Asia, historically. It's got strong historical links with Afghanistan, which is a key country, with Pakistan, which is on its borders, even with the southern part of what used to be the Soviet Union, Turkey, all next door to this country. And the last thing that the imperialists want is instability, as they would put it, anarchy in Iran. Just imagine, if there's a revolution in Iran and it overthrows this regime from below, what's going to happen within a matter of weeks in Egypt, where Mubarak is hanging, as I say, by a thread, or Saudi Arabia? They're all trembling in their shoes. That's why all of a sudden these nice foreign Democrats have kept very quiet about this and being very reasoned about it. By the way, they're very selective in their defense of democracy. Yeah, they attack the Iranians, okay. They don't see them attack dictatorial regimes like Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Morocco. They keep quiet about that. That's okay, because they're pro-imperialists. And the fact of the matter is that these regimes, most of them are hanging by a thread because of the world economic crisis, because of the falling living standards of the masses. It's not reported in the press. They report all kinds of rubbish. Even on a serious channel like Channel 4, they report all kinds of nonsense and rubbish. When did they ever report the fact that there's been big strikes in Iran in the last period? Who knows about that? Nobody knows about it. And big strikes in Egypt in the last period, and big anti-regime demonstrations in Egypt. They don't like to report these things. And now it's suddenly emerged. Incidentally, they falsify history. The British and Americans overthrew a democratic government in Iran in 1953, the government of Mossadegh, which was a bourgeois democratic government, it was a genuinely elected government. They overthrew it. And these same ladies and gentlemen, these same Western hypocrites now got the cheek to lecture the people of Iran on the subject of democracy. What stinking hypocrisy. How can that be taken seriously? They overthrew Mossadegh and they replaced, because of oil, because they wanted to grab the oil wealth of Iran. It's an important factor in the equation. They replaced him with this monster, the Shah of Iran, who was a terrible, one of the bloodiest tyrants you could imagine, one of the most horrific regimes of repression you could imagine, with his secret police, the Savak, murdering, torturing, the most bestial tortures and so on, spying on people. That's the regime that the West installed in Iran. That's the benefits of Western democracy that the people of Iran enjoyed. And in 1979, despite what is said, it was a mass movement very similar now, on an even bigger scale, that overthrew the Shah. It was a tremendous thing. They're very courageous people, the people of Iran. Very courageous people who stood up to this tyrant, and although they were killed, they were massacred, they were tortured, and so on. They stood their ground. And eventually, through the intervention of the Iranian working class, which is one of the most powerful working classes in the whole region, along with the working class of Egypt. It was a general strike, the strike particularly the oil workers, that finished the Shah. And that's got an important lesson for the present movement. Unfortunately, for certain reasons that I haven't got time to go into, it's partly due to the wrong policies of the workers' parties, particularly the Communist Party, the Tudeh party. Unfortunately, this marvelous movement was hijacked by the mullahs, by Khomeini, who had nothing to do with it. He was sitting in Paris. He had nothing to do with this movement in Iran. And the whole thing was diverted along the most reactionary lines. And we have to be clear upon this point. There is nothing whatsoever progressive about the present regime in Iran, although they call themselves revolutionary. Well, the Pope calls himself a Christian, so what? You know? Some of the Labour Party leaders call themselves socialists, so what? Brezhnev called himself a communist, so what? Doesn't matter what you call yourself. It's quite amusing if it wasn't so serious. These Basajis, these so-called revolutionary guards, which they've unleashed like mad dogs against the population, are counter-revolutionary guards. It's the opposite. It's a counter-revolutionary regime. These are counter-revolutionary guards, lumpen proletarians, thugs of this horrific regime. But you see, but 30 years have passed. 30 years have passed. And the people of Iran have had 30 years' experience of this fundamentalist, reactionary mullah regime. Incidentally, irony of ironies. One of the main rallying calls of the revolution of 1979 was to denounce the Shah's regime, that it was not just pro-Western, not just reactionary, but it was corrupt. They were completely corrupt, it's true. The Shah was completely corrupt. Disgusting, obscene wealth, alongside the most terrible poverty in what should be a prosperous country, like all the countries who possess oil in that region. Yes, the Shah was corrupt, and the mullahs, Khomeini and so on, they kept, oh no, we are clean, Mr. Clean. Khomeini was Mr. Clean. They were supposed to be not corrupt. Well, you know, experience tells us that any totalitarian regime, any authoritarian dictatorship is always corrupt.